The cold, damp air of the Ryugando cave clings to your skin as you sit across from a man who is actively coughing blood into a silk cloth. He is 60 years old, skeletal, and dying, yet his eyes possess a clarity that makes your own life feel like a blur of static. Dokodo, the way of walking alone. You came here seeking a master to give your life purpose, but he tells you that needing a master is your primary weakness. He tells you that until you can stand entirely by yourself, without the crutch of belonging, you are not a warrior. You are merely a tool waiting for a hand to grip you. But here is the part most people miss. We are biologically wired to seek the herd. Our ancestors survived because they belonged to a tribe, and that ancient programming makes isolation feel like a death sentence. We think that belonging to a group, a company, a family, a political movement, gives us identity and safety. That assumption sounds logical until you look closer. Musashi realized that belonging is often just a high-priced trade-off. In exchange for safety and approval, you surrender your internal compass. You stop acting on what is true and start acting on what is socially acceptable. This is why the Dokodo begins with a precept that sounds simple but is psychologically brutal. Accept everything just as it is. Musashi watched a young ronin named Takeshi kneel in the dirt, grieving for a fallen lord and a scattered clan. Takeshi was at war with reality. He felt the world should have been different, and that resistance was paralyzing him. The data doesn't fail, our interpretation does. Musashi taught that suffering is not caused by external events, but by the gap between what is happening and what we want to happen. When you refuse to accept a loss, you are effectively trying to fight a ghost. You cannot move forward because you are still struggling with a past that no longer exists. Musashi's first test for any student was not a sword drill. It was 7 days of survival with nothing but the clothes on their back, forced to accept hunger, rain, and cold without a single internal complaint. He wanted them to see that the world does not owe them comfort, and that their need for belonging was actually just a fear of their own insignificance. This is where the risk quietly increases for the modern individual. We surround ourselves with partial feelings, the temporary highs of social validation, and the comfort of shared opinions. Musashi warned, do not depend on partial feelings. If your sense of self is built on how others perceive you, you are building your house on shifting sand. The moment the group changes its mind or the institution collapses, you collapse with it. To walk alone, as Musashi did, is not to be a hermit or to hate humanity. It is to achieve a state of think lightly of yourself and deeply of the world. This is a realistic but unsettling contradiction. Most people do the exact opposite. They think obsessively about themselves, their status, their problems, their desires, and think very lightly of the vast, complex world around them. By shrinking your ego, you actually expand your capability. When you stop defending the story of who you are finally free to act with total precision. And this is why the standard advice to find your tribe can be dangerous. If your tribe demands that you lie to yourself or compromise your honor for the sake of unity, you have lost the only thing that is actually yours. Musashi's life was a testament to the idea that a man who owns nothing but his principles is more powerful than a lord who owns a province but is a slave to his reputation. He traveled Japan as a wanderer, repairing bridges, painting masterpieces, and winning duels, all while refusing the luxury and security offered by powerful daimyos. He chose isolation not because he was lonely, but because he was free. The Dokodo is a transmission of that freedom. It is a guide for those who realize that the ultimate master isn't a person or a god, but the path you forge for yourself. But as Musashi's time grew short, he realized that the hardest part of the path isn't the physical solitude, it's the psychological detachment from the things we love most. He was about to reveal the final, most difficult principles, the ones that require you to look at your own death and not blink. Musashi's final principles were not a retirement plan, They were a demolition of the last remaining walls of the ego. He pointed to the scroll and whispered the words that would eventually define the rest of Takeshi's life. Do not fear death. This sounds like a standard warrior cliché until you realize that Musashi wasn't talking about bravado in the heat of battle. He was talking about a deep, cellular acceptance of the inevitable. He understood that if you fear the end of your life, you will spend the entirety of it making compromises. You will cling to bad relationships, stay in soul-crushing jobs, and stay silent when you should speak, all because you are afraid of the consequences of standing alone. But here is the part most people miss. We think that by accumulating possessions, land, and status, we are building a fortress against the uncertainty of the future. We believe that securing our old age is the ultimate goal of a successful life. That assumption sounds logical, until you look closer. Musashi taught that the more you own, the more points of contact the world has to hurt you. He commanded Takeshi to go into the mountains for 30 days with absolutely nothing but his swords and the clothes on his back. He wanted Takeshi to experience the terrifying realization that he was cosmically insignificant, that the stars would continue to burn and the mountains would continue to erode, whether he lived or died. The data doesn't fail, our interpretation does.
We interpret our insignificance as a reason for despair, but Musashi saw it as the ultimate liberation. If you don't matter to the universe, you are finally free to matter to yourself. You are free to be good for no reward, to be strong for no audience, and to walk your path simply because it is the path you chose. This is the essence of do not seek to accumulate possessions for old age. When you stop trying to control a future that hasn't happened yet, you finally gain the ability to act perfectly in the present moment. And this is why the advice to play it safe can be dangerous. The person who plays it safe is always acting out of fear. They are guided by a desire for a certainty that the world cannot provide. Musashi entered 61 duels and never lost, not because he was faster or stronger than every opponent, many were superior athletes, but because he entered every fight already dead. He had already accepted his end, which meant he had zero hesitation. While his opponents were thinking about their families, their reputations, or their survival, Musashi was only thinking about the strike. He was the only person in the clearing who was truly free. As the old master's breathing slowed in the dim light of the cave, he left Takeshi with the final, most uncompromising rule: never stray from the way. This is the principle of the narrow gate. It means that once you have identified the truth, you no longer have the luxury of making excuses. You cannot be a warrior on Tuesdays and a coward on Wednesdays. You cannot be honest only when it's convenient. Walking alone means you are the only judge of your own integrity. There is no master to scold you and no lord to punish you. There is only the quiet voice of your own honor, which is much harder to satisfy than any external authority. Musashi died that night, leaving behind a legacy that had nothing to do with land or bloodlines. He left behind a frequency of being. Takeshi didn't become a famous general or a wealthy man. He became a wanderer who fixed bridges, protected the weak, and lived with such complete independence that people began to seek him out just to understand the peace he carried. He realized that alone is not the same as lonely. To be alone is to be self-contained. It is to be a person who carries their own light into the darkness. This path is still open today. It doesn't require a sword or a cave in 17th century Japan. It requires the courage to stop seeking permission to be yourself. It requires you to look at your need for belonging and ask what it's costing you. The world will always try to pull you back into the herd with promises of safety and belonging, but the way of walking alone offers something far more valuable, a life that is actually yours. If you feel ready to start mapping your own internal code and stripping away the dependencies that are holding you back, I can help you break down Musashi's 21 precepts into a practical framework for modern life. Would
you like me to create a 7-day challenge focused on the first 3 principles of the Dokodo to help you begin your own path?